Hello guys, a little bit of a different video for this one. I've set up my camera to be recording top down onto a piece of paper so that I can just kind of give a little brief show of how I actually do my first step of making a knife, as I'm going to try and do a more in-depth series of short videos to just kind of improve on that first video I made, show how I design a knife from start to finish with each individual step. And of course the first step is sketching. It's not the only way you can do it. You can start directly in the computer, but this is how I work. I will generally just kind of have an idea in my mind of the style of knife I want. You know, do I want thumb studs? Do I want a flipper tab? And I will just kind of start blocking out some lines and just kind of working them in. This is a very, like, I guess it's a bit of a rough process because it's just kind of the first step to seeing how I want my design to come across. But I can add things like a choil, my plunge line, which the plunge line is very important because it kind of lets me know if I have space for a thumb stud or not. I'll often mark the pivot with a plus. That just makes it a lot easier to reference in my CAD program, Fusion360. So I can mark at the back, say I want a stop, not a stop pin, the backspace or the standoffs, and I can just kind of sketch out this, kind of throw in a line for a swedge maybe. Say I want a little scoop here for flicking a stud. I don't generally draw up how these look closed. I've kind of gotten to the point where I can visualize a little bit with the with how it's going to look, and I can measure from the pivot point to the tip of the knife to just kind of get a reference to see if, you know, if those are in scale. So often I'll do up a first sketch and then I'll go, okay, well, I like this, but this front handle portion here I'm not a big fan of. I don't like how fat this back end is, so I will sketch up a V2 with slightly different lines, and I'll just kind of iterate on that a little bit. Maybe just deepen that out a little bit. And while I'm doing this, I'm kind of thinking about what processes in Fusion I'm going to actually use to model up these different curves. So this one here, I would be modeling that up with a conic curve in Fusion, just to give it that kind of look of having a long line here and then a short curve there. I'll draw in a little pivot just to have as a reference. I do kind of like this sort of style where you've got the spine of your knife going back into the handle a fair bit. That just kind of helps blend the two sort of separate entities together a little bit. Just trying to make a very basic full finger, maybe 3.4 inch sort of knife. And I can draw in my blade. I can already tell that's a little bit long, so I can come in here and I can adjust that. Let's see. So if I want, I can put a plunge line in. This one, clearly, it doesn't really have as much room for a thumb stud, so maybe I'll look at it and I'll go, okay, well, I could make I could add a flipper tab in there. That would be not too bad, you know. It's a pretty standard sort of shape. But this is basically how the process works, is thinking about what sort of task do I want my knife to do, what blade length do I need, what ergonomics do I need, am I going to have a backspacer where it goes across the whole thing, or am I just going to have a singular standoff where, you know, it's a pretty simple little frame. You know, I can come back in here and I can add a swedge if I want to. These are generally just very rough, messy things. I am kind of liking this, so I might grab my fine line and just kind of try and emphasize some of these lines, just darken them up. So we will don't like how long this handle is though, so I'm going to chop it a little bit, and then I can curve that in. I'm not at all using this nice fancy brush like pen the right way, but that's fine. And so that's, I mean, I can take this as it is right now and I can bring this into Fusion. I can model this up, or I can continue adding a little bit of detail about where I want different chamfer lines coming in. You know, I can add a little note saying maybe I want to add a contour to the handle. But I mean, that's kind of the basic. So I think this is looking pretty okay, but I want to do one more sketch to see if I want to change anything. And if it looks good, then I will take a photo of this and put it into Fusion. That'll be the second video. But let's see. Maybe we go. Let's broaden up some of these lines a little bit. See, the issue here is that I've made my front finger choil drastically larger than it needs to be, but the rest of that doesn't look too bad. And then just kind of got to figure out, okay, what sort of, because I prefer thumb studs. They're a little bit nicer, but they do require just a little bit, I guess, a different approach on how you do your plunge. So as you can see, this is the designs all relate. I just realized you can't actually see that. I've taken it off frame accidentally, sorry about that. But, you know, you can add a pretty big choil to that just so that you clear that thumb stud. You know, give it this nice big beefy blade. Just almost a modified sheep's foot, I guess you could call that. These ones would probably be curves in Fusion. I generally don't like using straight lines too much. I find them a little bit rigid, a little bit they're not as comfortable, of course. But I do like to also just reduce the amount of lines in general that I have when I'm designing. I don't like to have a bazillion facets or something for the front of my handle. And I can maybe we have a pin there and we have a and that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty confident I could actually pull this into Fusion and make that blade fit into that handle. I'm pretty confident that would be pretty comfortable to hold. You know, I can go in and I can add more details, just little reference lines, like maybe a little bit of a scribble here, say that's a good reference to know that that's where I'm going to add some jimping. If I want to think about like speed holes or anything, I can kind of go, okay, well, maybe I want, you know, some little speed hole sort of things up here. I can kind of style those in a little bit and see, well, does that look okay? And maybe not, you know, try out something down here, because this is just the sketching stage. I can change all this up. And completely optional, but sometimes helps, is to figure out your pocket clip just really quickly. Just go, okay, if I have a pocket clip, how is that going to sit? You know, are my fingers going to sit in the right place with it? Is that going to be comfortable? Is it going to interrupt and interfere with my backspacer? And that won't. That looks like a pretty decent design. So I'll come over here and I'll go, I want 85mm blade length, because that's kind of how I scale my designs, is by the blade length. I feel like that's a much more important target to achieve than the handle. There is basic things, of course, with the handle, making sure they're comfortable, you know, make sure this is at least 20 to 25 is what I like to do, just so that you can really get your hand in there, and any sort of like range of finger sizes can lock into that. But with this being a very neutral handle shape, the rest of the handle size doesn't matter too much. It should be fairly comfortable, and I can always, you know, make it more comfortable in Fusion if I want. But I think that's pretty much my sketch good. You know, I've kind of designed this for being a frame lock, so there shouldn't be anything too complicated. That will be the series. The next video will be going over putting this sketch into Fusion360, scaling the sketch, and then doing the basic just profile of the blade, the profile of the handle, making sure that those two work together. It looks good open, it looks good closed. Just get everything really set into stone. And then we have a really good foundation for everything else that we want to do to this. And that's just the key thing, is making sure you start with a good foundation. Make sure that you have room to adapt your design. But if you made it through the entire video, thank you very much. And I will hopefully see you on the next one, as long as this design doesn't give me any issues. But I don't see it giving me any issues. Fingers crossed. Thank you, and goodbye.